Good afternoon. In just a few minutes after I'm done with you and you are done with me, we will be joined again by our colleague Adam Abdelmoula, who, as you know, is the humanitarian coordinator for Somalia, and he will be here to discuss the worsening drought and hunger situation in Somalia. Tomorrow, that is Wednesday? Yes, good. Tomorrow, Wednesday, the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, will be here in this room to introduce the second report of the Global Crisis Response Group. As you will recall, the Secretary General launched this effort earlier this year to examine the impact of the war in Ukraine on the food, fuel, and finance sectors. He will just make some remarks but not be able to take questions. Rebecca Greenspan, the Secretary General of the UN Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, will then present the report and answer your questions. In his remarks a few hours ago following the election of the President of the 77th General Assembly, the Secretary General congratulated the President-elect Csaba Kőrösi of Hungary and also expressed his deep gratitude to the current President, Abdulla Shahid. We face a world in peril, the Secretary General said, and the months ahead will test the multilateral system. The 77th session can be a moment of transformation. Mr. Guterres added, a time to recalibrate multilateralism and strengthen the foundation of global cooperation. He welcomed the President-elect Kőrösi's focus on solutions through solidarity, sustainability, and science, and said that he and the entire UN system look forward to working with him. His remarks were shared with you. Our Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, was in Tajikistan today as part of her ongoing Central Asia trip. She opened up the second Dushanbe Water Action Decade Conference together with the President of Tajikistan, His Excellency Emomali Rahmon. After she made opening remarks at the signature ceremony for the new cooperation framework between the government of Tajikistan and the UN. The cooperation framework focuses on making progress against priorities of development, peace, security, and human rights over the next 4 years in Tajikistan. In the afternoon, the Deputy Secretary General traveled to a village in the Rudaki district outside of Dushanbe to visit a mobile health fair supported by the Spotlight Initiative. The fair brings essential services such as health, psychosocial, and legal services to women and girls in isolated communities. To date, more than 3,500 women and girls have been reached through these fairs in villages around Tajikistan. Ms. Mohammed also visited a Teachers Innovation Center in Dushanbe, which is supported by the UN, where she met teachers and children and recorded some educational podcasts for use in digital classrooms. The Deputy Secretary General welcomed Tajikistan's intention to share its experience in innovative educational tools for the forthcoming Transforming Education Summit to be convened by the Secretary General in September. Quick update from Yemen. Our envoy for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, yesterday afternoon shared with the government of Yemen and Ansar Allah representatives a revised proposal on the phased reopening of the roads, including the implementation mechanism and guarantees for the safety of civilian travelers based on the discussions he's been having with both sides. The updated proposal calls for the reopening of roads, including a main route leading into and out of Taiz city. The proposals take into consideration suggestions from both parties, as well as feedback from Yemeni civil society. Mr. Grunberg said this is a first step in our collective efforts to lift restrictions on the freedom of movement of Yemeni women, men, and children within the country. He hopes the proposed initiatives will sustain the momentum needed to move towards discussion on more durable arrangements within the multi-track process. And as a programming note, Mr. Grunberg should be in New York next week to brief the Security Council in person, and I think he will make himself available for a stakeout at some point. Moving on to Ukraine, where the war continues to have a direct and terrible tolls on people living in Ukraine. The UN Human Rights Office says that as of yesterday, 4,253 men, women, and children have been killed, while more than 5,000 other people have been injured. More than half of these casualties were recorded in Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts, where the heaviest fighting is currently taking place. And as we've been saying, these numbers are probably very likely undercounted, given the lack of access. We, along with our partners in Ukraine, continue to reach more people with humanitarian assistance. We've helped 7.8 million people across the country to date. And on a positive note, the Ukraine Flash Appeal is currently more than 72% funded, with $1.62 billion of the $2.25 billion requested having been received. We thank our donors for contributing generously and count on them for their continued support. We also call on donors to focus on a lot of the underfunded humanitarian appeals, which I'm sure our guest from Somalia will flag. You will have noticed yesterday afternoon we put out a statement which the Secretary General condemned in the strongest terms the heinous attack against that took place at the St. Francis Catholic Church in Owo in Ondo State in Nigeria, and which resulted in the deaths and injuries of scores of civilians for people who had gathered for Pentecost services. The Secretary General emphasized that attacks on places of worship are abhorrent and urged the Nigerian authorities to spare no effort in bringing the perpetrators to justice. Quick update from Uganda, where the UN Central Emergency Response Fund has just allocated $4 million to address the rising food insecurity in the Karamoja region in the northeast of Uganda. Poor food production there has caused hunger to increase in the last 2 years. Today, over 500,000 men, women, and children in Karamoja, that's more than 40% of the region's population, are believed to be experiencing high levels of acute food insecurity. That includes some 90,000 people facing emergency levels of food insecurity. Poor diets and disease have also led to a rise in acute malnutrition. More than 90,000 children and nearly 9,500 pregnant or lactating women are acutely malnourished or need treatment. The new funding will allow us and our partners to support nearly 300,000 people impacted by drought with food and nutrition, water, healthcare, child protection, and other necessary assistance. An update from the Islamic Republic of Iran, where the team there, UN team led by coordinator Stéphane Presner, continues to support the national response to health, humanitarian, socioeconomic needs in the COVID-19 crisis. Our team tells us that the sixth wave of COVID-19 has been gradually fading over the spring months. On June 2nd, the country had its first day since the beginning of the pandemic without any reported deaths. A team on the ground has been supporting the vaccination efforts, with 70% of the population now fully vaccinated. With our team's support, refugees and undocumented Afghans have been included in the response through the pandemic, with more than 80% of Afghans receiving at least a first dose. Today is World Food Safety Day, so check those expiration dates of your items in your fridge. This year's theme is Food Safety, Everyone's Business. The day aims to draw attention and inspire action to help prevent, detect, and manage foodborne risks, contributing to food security, human health and economic prosperity, agriculture, market access, tourism, and sustainable development. Another programming note, 3 p.m. in the Trusteeship Council in this very building, the United Nations will bestow the first UN Trailblazer Award for Women, Justice, and Corrections Officers to Tene Maimouna Zungranda of Burkina Faso. The Chef de Cabinet, Courtney Rattray, will present the award to Ms. Zungranda on behalf of the Secretary General, and you're invited to watch or attend the ceremony. Tene Maimouna Zungranda was first deployed to the UN multidimensional peacekeeping force in the Central African Republic between 2014 and 2017. Later in 2020, she supports one of the most difficult tasks in the mission, the demilitarization of the Central African Republic's prison system. We congratulate her, and there'll be a press release on that. Lastly, we thank our friends in a country whose official capital is Sucre. They've become the latest country to pay their full dues. It's a landlocked country. Come on. That I know what that means. It is Bolivia, and we thank them. They are the 100. It is the official capital. They have 105th. They become the 105th member state. So, Edie, please.
Thank you, Steph. Does the Secretary General have any comment on the recent escalation of military action, including missiles and flights related to North Korea's missile testing?
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously concerned that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is continuing its pursuit of a nuclear weapons program, including the development of various missiles using ballistic technology. I think this clearly only contributes to increasing regional and international tensions. I think it's also important to reiterate that for us, diplomatic engagement remains the only path forward to a verifiable and denuclearized Korean peninsula.
And a follow-up on tomorrow's press briefing and conference with the Secretary General and Ms. Greenspan. Are we going to get to look at this report before?
Yes, ma'am. We should have it to you later this afternoon. Edward.
Hi, Steph. I have several questions. First, on Mali. The military leader of Mali signed a decree and read out on the state television on Monday, said that the duration of transition, to civilian government is fixed at 24 months from March 26, 2020, which means in 2024. That's what they decided to transfer the power to civilian government. Any reaction from the Secretary General?
I mean, we've seen the announcement. I think we've always made clear our wish for a quick transition. We're continuing to work now with regional actors, including the African Union and ECOWAS, and the transitional authorities to reach an agreement on the transitional timeline. We, of course, we acknowledge the recent efforts by all concerned actors towards reaching a consensus, which would lead to a return to constitutional rule.
Second question is on Ukraine. The UK Foreign Minister Prentice said that Russia is allegedly stealing Ukrainian grain and must be investigated. Is the UN aware of such conduct from of Russia in Ukraine?
Look, we've seen. There was recent media reports. We were talking to our colleagues at WFP. Who would be in the lead? They have no way of verifying these allegations. I think WFP is, as we all have been advocating for free movement of food from the Black Sea to ensure that the needs of people around the world are met, and that's what the Secretary General has been working towards.
One last question. This morning, the Secretary General, when he congratulated the new president of the General Assembly, he said, the 77th session can be a moment of transformation, a time to recalibrate multilateralism and strengthen the foundation of global cooperation. What does that mean by saying it's a time to recalibrate multilateralism?
Well, I think what the Secretary General was referring to is that, and it's clear for all to see, that the international system, the multilateral system, has been put to a test recently and even in the short past. He has put forward some ideas through his common agenda on how to adapt the UN to the 21st century, an organization created in 1945. We're now in 2022, and the UN has changed since then. But it is important to look at the bigger picture as well. Madame.
Steph, on the Ukrainian grain issue, has the Secretary General been working the telephones, or has he left it primarily to Mr. Griffiths and Ms. Greenspan?
Secretary General spends a lot of time on the phone on many issues.
Might you mention who he's called on this particular issue?
I might not. Okay. Yes. Kirsten, sorry. Go ahead. Kirsten, go ahead. Come on.
Thanks, Steph. I have to ask, apparently the executive board of UNOPS has been meeting this week, and the United States, backed by 25 other countries, called for not only a full accounting of the program, not of UNOPS, let's step back. Of course, I'm referring to the report that came out that some $60 million had been questionably invested, prompting an investigation, the resignation of the executive director, and so on. So in follow-up to that, countries are asking for a full accounting of this 3SI program that was in place and suspending the funds, transferring them back to the operational reserve, and accountability, essentially. My understanding from this room is that there is an investigation underway, but that the investigation was going to take some time. It wasn't going to be made public. My question, given all of that, and given the Secretary General's expressed concern about development funds drying up, is there any effort to make this report available to the public, to have any other people been held accountable in the leadership there? Where do things stand with that, and where's it going?
First of all, the governing board is obviously of UNOPS is responsible for its oversight, and the interim executive director, Jens Wendel, is working very closely to answer all the concerns of the executive board as it should be. There had been an investigation by the Office of Internal Service Oversights to look at the different accusations and allegations of malfeasance or fraud, whatever word you want to use, within UNOPS. That report, which, like all OIRS report, those types of OIRS investigations, is confidential, has been sent to the Secretary General's office. The Secretary General will then make a decision on, as he would in any types of report. There are different paths forward. One is administrative actions against individuals, and I can't speak to the nature of this case. If we find that there is possible criminal wrongdoing, we then refer the case to the relevant judicial authority. So the OIRS report has been done. As soon as decisions are made by the Secretary General, we will take action. This report, this investigation, was triggered in part by issues raised in a number of auditors' reports. So the Secretary General took the decision. He's been very determined in all cases of possible malfeasance to investigate fully and to hold people accountable.
So the report, the investigation is complete.
The OIOS part is complete.
Is the executive director still collecting a pension?
No,
the
the executive director resigned, if you'll recall, a few weeks ago, and so now there's an interim executive director, Jens Wendel, who's a experienced UN manager, and he is guiding he's guiding UNOPS through this period.
Right, but I just didn't know if that entitled her still to
No, she
certain
resigned. No,
benefits
she
or-
resigned and left. Senora.
Thank you, Steph. Again, on Ukrainian grain, if you have any update concerning the conversation with the SG had yesterday, and again, the Turkish government is saying today that there is a progress. So if you have any...
I mean, from our standpoint, we've been very clear. The Secretary General is determined to move on what he's referred to as a package deal, on having to deal with the flow of grain from Ukraine, and also the export of food and fertilizer. Thank you, from the Russian Federation. Efforts are continuing. At every point where things have been done from our end, we will speak publicly about it. While the discussions are ongoing, we will not.
Thank you, Stéphane. On Palestine, according to the findings of the Commission of Investigation that established, as you know, by the UN Human Rights Council, the occupation and discrimination against Palestinians are the main causes of the violence and instability. Also, ending the occupation is a key factor to halt violence. What's your comment on this and on the report?
On the report, on the report, we really have nothing to say. This is a report from the commission created by the Human Rights Council. I think its findings speak for themselves, but the Secretary General was not involved in it in any way. As for our position on the situation, it remains unchanged. Mr. Veneslan, I think, was very clear in the Security Council last week, so I have nothing to add. Patrick.
Good afternoon, Steph. Quick question on the UN MINUSMA of Mali. As you know, the Council is expected to renew the mandate at the end of the month. However, some critics say that the mandate should end given the continued violence here, lack of peace. I have a question on what the Secretary General said in an interview with the French radio station Radio France, May 5th. He said that the mandate should not be ended because, quote, the consequences would be terrible. Can you elaborate on that? What consequences?
Well, I mean, I think it doesn't take much imagination to imagine what would happen in Mali if the UN peacekeeping troops were to disappear overnight, and the impact on civilians who depend on the protection of peacekeepers, or humanitarian operation, and the overall security situation. And I think the Malian people would be the civilians would be the first and main victims. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, let me get back to North Korea. Is there any specific diplomatic effort involving the UN that you can elaborate on that is
no.
intended to prevent the...
No, I mean, we are, as always, the Secretary, our good officers are available, but I think we have not involved at this point in the diplomatic talks or contacts between different groups. Okay, I don't think there are any questions in the chat.